It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Gessman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Mr. Josh Gessman, Mr. Kevin Baxter, back with you on a Monday night to talk about all things LA Galaxy for the next 30 minutes, which means we're at least going 60 minutes. It's usually how it happens on this show, but before we get any further, we're going to check in with Mr. Kevin Baxter. Kevin, how's everything going for you? Hanging in there?
Oh, it's been a busy day. King's doing a lot of, making a lot of news. U.S. Soccer Federation entering a joint bid for the World Cup in 2026, so don't buy your tickets just yet. But that was newsy. And then, of course, we have the Galaxy coming off arguably their most important game of the season, especially when you look at what's coming up next.
Yeah, a long trip over to Orlando for the LA Galaxy, and then home for 3 games against some tough opponents. So the stretch over to Orlando maybe takes a little bit of pressure off. I think even Jermaine Jones may have said that after the game, that says, hey, now we can go to Orlando with a little bit less pressure on ourselves and sort of look at that as a game that we can compete in, but not have like sort of a monkey on our back, that type of thing. But the LA Galaxy did get a 2-0 win over a 10-man Montreal Impact team. We have to throw that in there, Kevin. We don't recap it, but we'll give our quick thoughts on here again. But the LA Galaxy, again, playing 11 versus 10. That's twice this year. They've also been on the other side of that. They've had 3 of their 5 games impacted by a red card in 2017 so far.
Yeah, but you know what? This game was different from all the others. I thought the Galaxy played their best game of the season. If you listen to Curt Onalfo, he'll tell you that they played as good or better than Dallas in the first game. I don't know about that. He'll tell you that they outplayed Portland in the second game. Maybe, they were down to 10 men, but they only got 1 shot on goal in that game. Then they went to Real Salt Lake, won. Well, I don't have to go through the whole season, but my point is Curt Onalfo has said that they've played as well as their opponents in all of the games this year. I don't know if I believe that, but certainly the game they played against Montreal, they were in control the entire game. Yes, it certainly helped them when Montreal went down to 10 men in the last minute of the first half, but the Galaxy were just in control. They played really well, and I think one thing that might have made a difference, a lot of the players hinted at the fact that there was some come to Jesus moments during the week where the team, the players, and maybe with some of the coaches got together and aired out some grievances. At least that was sort of the vibe I was picking up. And one of the problems apparently was Jermaine Jones wanted Jelle Van Damme was the guy he mentioned by name, but he wanted players to do what their job description said. Jelle Van Damme is a center back. He's not supposed to be pushing forward in the attack. And Jermaine Jones let him know that. João Pedro is a holding midfielder. He's not supposed to be pushing forward in the attack. So, Jermaine Jones, I think, pushed his opinion that, guys need to do their jobs. If all 11 players do their job well, the team will win. If one guy's trying to do 3 people's jobs, he's not going to do it very well. So, I say that just to look at Jelle Van Damme did seem to stay back in position for most of the game. João Pedro still not a great game, but he also played his position. It seemed like, and I thought Giovanni Dos Santos got a little more involved in the attack. He had a couple of nice crosses, didn't get anything for his work, but I thought it was their best performance of the season, and I thought everybody played where they were supposed to play and did what they were supposed to do. And if it happened the way we thought it happened, and the players did have this meeting, I think Jermaine Jones comes out looking like he's correct here.
Yeah, he very well may, and I will agree with you. I do think this is the LA Galaxy's best performance to date, and they were winning 1-0 before that 44th minute red card that sort of changed things up again. So, and I'm with you, Kevin. I felt like they dominated that first half. They played really well. They were dynamic. They were dangerous. I mean, realistically, they had 2 or 3 really good chances in the first half. They converted one of those with Alessandrini getting a goal. So I was happy to see that. Jermaine Jones gets a goal in the second half. Again, the LA Galaxy outcompeted Montreal. They looked, quite honestly, Kevin, more talented than Montreal on the night, even in the first half, definitely into the second half. Yes, the red card certainly comes into effect on a lot of things. And you can never say, oh, without that red card, they still would have won the game. But the bottom line is that they were head and shoulders above a Montreal team that was probably tired, 3 road games in a row, traveling from Montreal to LA. I can see all of the things that could sort of get in the way of Montreal coming in and really competing in this game, but the Galaxy did what they were supposed to do. You can't get angry, and people tend to do this. They diminish games where there is a red card, Kevin, you can't get angry when the Galaxy do exactly what they're supposed to do, which is beat a team when you're up a man. Last year, I can remember when in Vancouver, when the LA Galaxy, I think, were up a man, maybe, and they couldn't score and they couldn't get it. It was one of these games where last year they were up the man and they couldn't get it done, and that's not the case. The Galaxy get it done. They get their first home win of the season, 2-0 over the Montreal Impact. All right, lots of things to talk about from this game, Kevin. The first and maybe the most obvious, as I was writing notes for this game and getting ready on Friday night at StubHub Center, was that Curt Onalfo starting Diop over Rowe again, and I think this was after you and myself, because I'm certainly not going to leave myself here, but you and I both theorized that Diop was not going to play in this game, that Curt Onalfo needed to set a tone, that he was not going to accept a poor performance from Diop when you had somebody like Brian Rowe. So as far as I know, coach's decision, as I was told by the LA Galaxy, to start Diop over Brian Rowe. What did we learn from Diop starting in this game?
Well, a couple of things. One of the things, Curt Onalfo talked early in the season of when he started Diop the first time, he wanted to engender some competition at goalkeeper. You can't be a competition if one guy's going to start no matter what. I thought Diop in the game in Vancouver, charging off the line twice, giving up one goal and almost giving up a second, he just didn't have a good game, and I think that was universally agreed upon, that he did not play well in Vancouver. And I thought that was the opportunity for Curt Onalfo to say, look, it's a competition. You did not compete well in Vancouver, therefore you lose your job, and we're going to give Brian Rowe a chance. He didn't do that, and so is the message Diop takes from that, my coach has my back, which is a good message, or is it I'm the starter no matter what, which is a bad message? I will say that Diop played a much better game. He stayed home again. He didn't charge off the line at every opportunity. He made a couple of really stout saves. He wasn't tested all that much, I didn't think, but when he was tested, he came through. I thought he played a good game. I'd like to see Brian Rowe play again. I think Brian Rowe's a great goalkeeper and did everything to prove that last year. And another player that kind of fits into that, another guy that I did not think was going to start, was João Pedro. Yes, he is a TAM player. Yes, he is going to play a lot this year. Yes, he is the starting holding midfielder. All those things are correct. But he also had a bad game in Vancouver. And I really thought he would have benefited from Curt Onalfo to say, look, you're new to this league. You've only played a few games here. You're 23. Why don't you watch this game from the sidelines and sort of get your bearings and get some perspective on what the game looks like? See the whole game. Just don't see your part of it. I think it would have been helpful for him. But instead, João Pedro went out and played the game too. And again, is Curt Onalfo telling these guys, look, I got your back. Don't worry about making one little mistake. It's okay. Or is it you're the starter, no matter what happens, you're going to be out there?
Yeah, again, we'll start with, I thought Diop had a perfectly fine game. I don't think he was overly tested all that much. I think he had to make one save on the night. He made that save, and that was realistically it. He stayed inside his box. He looked calm, composed. Overall, it's a win for Onalfo and a win for the LA Galaxy that Diop was able to go out there and play it. I still wouldn't have started him. Unless there's something wrong with Brian Rowe, which I was told there was not. There was no reason for Diop to be out there in that game. Brian Rowe, quite honestly, deserved a chance to win that job back. And if there is competition, like you said, Kevin, then let's see that competition. Let's see what's going to happen. I think Diop, and again, it's going to sound like a broken record for me, Kevin, is that Diop has the higher ceiling. He's more athletic. He can do everything that realistically you could ask of a goalkeeper, but he's got some real downsides, and Vancouver showed it. But he's also, maybe as part of his growing pains and learning from Clement Diop, maybe he's going to get better, and he has to get better if he's going to stay in that number one spot. Somebody asked me who the number one spot is right now. And that number one spot for me is Clement Diop. If you're going to ask me right now who I think Curt Onalfo thinks the number one is, it's Diop. And I think it's been made clear after this last game. Now,
well, he's clearly the goalkeeper of the future, and I think maybe that's part of what this is all about. Look, go out there and make your mistakes now. Right now, at this point of the season, we're not competing for the supporter shield. Go out there and learn your job because he is the guy of the future. But then don't talk about engendering competition. Tell us he's your starting goalkeeper.
Yeah, and that is the interesting thing as we go forward, is who is the number one. I mean, now saying all that, Kevin, I fully expect that, Curt Onalfo throws us all a curveball and Brian Rowe starts in Orlando. Like, I could easily see that coming. But, if it's going to be Diop, that's fine. Let's make it Diop and let's go with that and let's live with that. But, realistically, there was supposed to be a competition here, and that's not what we're seeing. And we're also seeing, and I agree with you on the Joao Pedro, in terms of when you have a bad game, are there consequences? And so far, Curt Onalfo has basically said with the people he's starting and the way he's playing, there are no consequences to having a bad game. Maybe he thought everybody had a bad game in Vancouver, Kevin, and realistically, you can't sit everybody. But there were some guys, Diop and Joao Pedro were two of the worst offenders against Vancouver, who both, I thought, responded well. And that's the other flip side to this that's always difficult. As a coach and as a boss or as a motivator, whoever you're trying to do, Kevin, do you kill somebody's confidence with Diop if you bench him after a game in Vancouver? And did this start against Montreal regain that confidence in a young player, and now you have him on a nice, level, even keel where you think that, you can work with him and he's going to be useful? Do you break Diop by not letting him start against Montreal if you drop him after a bad game against Vancouver?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, again, with listening to Jermaine Jones and some of the other players, they know who had the bad games in Vancouver. Jermaine would not out those people by name, but it was clear who he was talking about. He was talking about Diop. He was talking about Joao Pedro. He was unhappy with Van Dam wandering around the field. So all those things were taken care of. And, let's just say this about Curt Onalfo. He's coached these guys, LA Galaxy too. The one thing that he knows or that he's learned in the last 4 years is he's learned about the psyche of young players, because he's certainly motivated those guys at LA Galaxy too to play very well. He knows these players he's coaching now. He's had Diop for a number of years. He hasn't had Joao Pedro for a number of years, but I think you say a 23-year-old guy, a midfielder, a little shaky on the confidence side. What do I do with that? I've been down that road before, is what Curt Onalfo would say. So, I don't agree with the decisions. Again, I was pretty bold last week. I thought that Diop and Joao Pedro both should have sat, and I thought I had good reasons why. Curt Onalfo disagreed with me. He's got the 2-0 win. He's the coach, and obviously he did the right thing. He pushed all the right buttons. It worked perfectly.
And the final sort of angle to this is, and you hinted on it, coaching Diop at LA Galaxy 2, Diop is a Curt Onalfo guy. And coaches like to bring in their guys, and they tend to trust their guys. And so Curt Onalfo trusting Diop over Brian Rowe shouldn't really surprise anybody either, if it's simply a matter of, hey, this is my guy. I know him. I trust him. I've got his back. This is what's going on. He's my guy. He's in there. So, I mean, that's sort of the Diop versus Rowe at all angles. It's again, Rowe seems perfectly healthy, has been training. There's been no issues of any health problems that would keep him out and would continually give Diop the starting position unless Diop gets the starting position, unless he's the number one keeper. And right now it looks like that. And going against Orlando this week, I would expect that Diop is in goal for the LA Galaxy. And quite honestly, I expect Joao Pedro to be in midfield. I think, Kevin, that's what you and I disagree a little bit on it. And I think maybe, I said this on Twitter, I might be the only one who still is going to give Joao Pedro a pass on everything that he's done so far. He's 23 years old, comes to another country, playing on a new team, doing a whole bunch of things realistically that in his first 23 years he hasn't done. He's a little out of place, out of sorts, and I'm willing to work with him, mostly because I know how much money the LA Galaxy spent on him, and that's an investment they need to pay off. And so Joao Pedro needs to get better. For me, I don't think I thought he did have a much better game. Now, whether or not that's what happens whenever you play against 10 players instead of 11, Kevin, that's certainly a thing. But even in the first half, I thought he was doing better. Passing was getting better. Combinations through the midfield a little better. Getting tracking back and anticipation a little better. It seemed, at least, if anything, Kevin, it seems like he's trending in the correct direction after the Vancouver game.
Yeah, I think a lot of things happened after that Vancouver game, clearly. And you know what? Let's see how long this lasts. They're going across the country to play Orlando, an Orlando team that is unbeaten at home. It's going to be a very difficult trip. So the Galaxy needed this win at, again, the most important game of the season. I know the season's still young, but if they had lost that game or played poorly and maybe had a draw, things could have spiraled out of control really fast. They may go across the country and lay an egg in Orlando
which they've done before.
On Easter weekend, but they go there knowing how they can play. It's not a question anymore. Can we play well? And they know how to play well. They know that if guys do their job and not worry about the guy next to them doing theirs, if everyone has confidence in everyone else, they can play well. Will that be enough to beat Orlando? You know what? Maybe they don't need to beat Orlando. Maybe they just need to repeat that kind of performance, and maybe they come home losing 2-1 or 1-0, and maybe that's enough, because they certainly did play a good game, and Orlando's going to be a tough opponent. And maybe this is one of those games that Curt Onalfo talks about all the time, that you don't necessarily look at the results that you look at the performance.
Well, the last time the LA Galaxy realistically went to Orlando, Kevin, a little preview of Orlando, they got beat 4-0. That was the famous Tommy Meyer game where I think if you remember that, Tommy Meyer had one of the worst games I've ever seen a defender have, and 90% of it didn't even seem to be his fault. I think he had 2 balls deflect off of him and go into the back of the goal. Just guys were torching him, marking him. It was bad, and ultimately, I don't know that Tommy Meyer ever recovered from that particular game, and the LA Galaxy got smoked after winning MLS Cup in 2014. They went in 2015 and just got smoked 4-0 in Orlando. So that's what you can, sort of look at. And as you said, Kevin, the new stadium there, 25,000 seat plus stadium, has quickly become a very good home for Orlando City, and it's going to be a tough match. Traveling all that way, doing all that stuff is certainly going to be very, very tough.
Oh, and you talk about the travel, and you talk about this team. João Pedro, playing in Portugal, never had that kind of travel.
Right.
Alessandrini has never had this kind of travel. I mean, we're talking about traveling across the continent. Playing in France and Portugal, a long road trip might be a 90-minute train ride. This is going to be a very and they're going 3 time zones. By the way, Alessandrini did talk, I don't know if you were there, talked a lot after the game about trying to adjust to life in America. And he said one of the things was he was tired all the time. The jet lag and the time adjustment really threw him for a loop. And he said, now, I'm finally comfortable. He's had the one road trip. It was to Salt Lake. It wasn't a big deal. This will be interesting because MLS teams don't travel like football teams. They don't travel a long ways ahead of the game. They're probably pretty much going to go there a day before the game at most, and it's going to be difficult for him to adjust.
They're going earlier this time, which I was excited. They're traveling on
Maybe
Thursday.
That's why.
They're traveling on Thursday. So the Galaxy will travel on Thursday. They will train on Friday in Orlando, and then they'll have the game on Saturday. So there you go. So a little bit earlier, which quite honestly, Kevin, I would expect to see that for this particular trip going that far. If it's like a New York City trip or any of those, Philadelphia Union or Atlanta or any of these far East Coast teams, I would expect the Galaxy to go a day earlier, get the training in Orlando, get a little bit, more acclimated to the time zone and everything that's happening, and then, hopefully go in. But
that's not a big acclimation. I mean, they're going to go after training Thursday, so they're going to get there 9, 10, 11 o'clock local time, right? And so they're really only going to have the one day Friday to train a little bit and to get adjusted to the time before playing Saturday, which is obviously better than going Friday. But it's not. I don't know if it's enough time to really get to the point where you feel like you're adjusted. And I believe that game is it's going to be noon our time, so 3 o'clock there. Again,
right.
You're going to be getting it up at an unusual hour and going out and playing that game, which essentially they're going to be taking the field for what body time will feel like the morning. It'll be noon body time for those guys. So anyway, it's just something to keep an eye on. A couple of the guys are going to, this is going to be new to them. And Ashley Cole talked a lot last year about how difficult it is, and the people don't really realize that it's a continent-sized country.
Yeah, it is. It seems like a big. It doesn't seem like it would be that big a deal. It ends up being a very large deal. So we'll see how the LA Galaxy do. That game is on Fox and Fox Deportes, mainstream Fox, by the way, not Fox Sports. The main Fox and Fox Deportes for that game at noon, nationally televised. Just in case you were paying attention. Nathan Smith, Emmanuel Boateng, Jermaine Jones, Romain Alessandrini. What do all of these names have in common? In my opinion, Kevin, they all had excellent games for the LA Galaxy against Montreal. I was particularly enthused by Nathan Smith's performance. Every player that I talked to, and I think you were there too, that we talked to mentioned Nathan Smith and had nothing but ridiculously nice things to say about a kid. Jermaine Jones called him a little bulldog. I don't know if it gets better from a Jermaine Jones in terms of he's a little bulldog.
Well, and even, Kurt Onafo, who had Nathan Smith a little bit with LA Galaxy too, said that he thought he had a really good performance. He said it was great to see a young player who played just 1 year with Galaxy 2. Then he gets his opportunity, and look what he's done with it. He said he didn't want to get ahead of himself, but he was really pleased with performance and how he played. And Nathan Smith talked afterwards. It was interesting. He talked about how the guys on the team made him feel welcome, and he felt like he was part of the team. And I'm like, we're 5 games into the season, and you started a couple times. You are part of the team. They shouldn't make you feel part of the team. You are part of the team. And another thing that stood out to me in that game is I don't know whether you remember, there was a play down at the end boards where Nathan Smith collided with a Montreal player, and they both went into the. Well, Nathan went much harder into the advertising boards, and the Montreal player sort of took Nathan on a little bit, sort of got in his face, and Alessandrini was the first guy over to protect him. And I thought that said a lot. I mean, your second highest paid player, your designated player, the guy who is unquestionably right now the star of the team, coming in to help out young Nathan Smith and being the guy that gets in between and defends his teammate. I thought that said a lot about how the team is accepting Nathan Smith.
Yeah, well, the other part of that, and somebody actually, I wrote an article about Nathan Smith over at cornerofthegalaxy.com where you can read it at. A lot of good quotes in there from all the guys. So you can sort of hear what they said about Nate. But Nate went into the boards, and the Montreal player sort of came over to help him a little bit, but was still jawing at him, and Nate would have had none of it. Smitty would have none of it. He was ready to go. Alessandrini gets there to sort of step in the way of Nathan Smith. Somebody wrote on a comment to that. They said, Nathan Smith needs to get some balls, and then he'll be a better player. And I sat there and said, if anything, I want this kid to have a little bit less of a hothead because he seems like he's ready to go. He's one of these kids. He's a defender, which I like for my defenders, Kevin. I like him to have a little bit of an edge, but he's not the biggest guy, but he's not going to get pushed around. This kid has plenty of balls. Whoever wrote that, I disagree with you kindly and think that that's a stupid take on your part. So,
and he told me he came off the field bloodied. He had to go in and get, actually, I think that was right near the end of the first half, I remember, and he had to go in and get bandaged up, that he was actually bleeding after that little encounter. Didn't come out of the game, didn't ask to come out of the game, just said, rub some dirt on it, let's go.
That's right. So again, this kid has sort of the exact work ethic I think everybody's expecting, and has made us stop talking about the right back hole that was there right now. Listen, really early to get super hyped on this kid, but I was talking to some other people about him, and realistically, Kevin, he may be the most natural right back the LA Galaxy have had in a very, very long time. If you'd have to go back to Sean Franklin, and Sean Franklin's a converted center back for the LA Galaxy, came in, I think, in 2008, played out on that right-hand side for the first time in 2009. So if you look at that, Nathan Smith has a chance to sort of be on the same level or maybe even surpass Sean Franklin. In my mind, with what I've seen in a very small sample, and I understand it's small, but I want to at least try to quantify what I think we've seen so far, is you've seen a defender who is a smart, agile defender who does a pretty good job with angles and a pretty good job with anticipation. I'm not going to say he's not going to make mistakes, Kevin, but he has that. And then we have somebody who I think is better going forward right now than Robbie Rogers was on the right-hand side. Maybe Robbie Rogers on the left-hand side is a little bit better, but it could even be better than somebody like AJ De La Garza or going forward, or Sean Franklin. Whenever you look at sort of the history of the right-backs with the LA Galaxy, this kid could be the answer in 2017, and if he is the answer, Kevin, the LA Galaxy got so lucky, it's ridiculous.
Well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, as Kurt Onofo would say. He's had a couple of games, and he's played very well. But assuming that he is the real deal and he continues to play like this, the Galaxy are pretty lucky to get a very young guy like Daniel Steres to come out and play at center back and play as well as he has over the last year in 5 games. Jelle Van Damme, yes, I think they had an indication what they were getting with him. But, come on, let's face it. He's far surpassed expectations, I think. And now, Nathan Smith. So really, and Ashley Cole is new too, but I mean, the guy's the most decorated left back in the history of English football. So you can't say you weren't expecting that, but it's a new back line and guys that you didn't know, a few guys you didn't know what you were going to get that played extremely well. And maybe this is the time to talk about why Nathan Smith is playing at right back, because that wasn't an open position when we went into the preseason.
Yeah, we can talk about Robbie Rogers. Lots of people talking about Robbie Rogers, Kevin. There's lots of questions involving him. I probably get asked it once or twice a day. I'm trying to find the question that we got here from Javi, and Javi says, if the rumors are true and Rogers retires, which is the rumor out there right now, what does that mean for potential summer signings, which we can talk about in a little bit. But we're talking about Nathan Smith. We're talking about Robbie Rogers. Sort of what do we think is the latest? What do we know is the latest here on Robbie Rogers there, Kevin?
Well, I've talked to his agent a couple of times. I've left messages for Robbie. They haven't been answered. I did talk to Robbie at a Kings game this winter after the operation when he was still having the nerve issues in his foot. Just to bring everybody up to date, Robbie's had 8 surgeries on his legs. Knee, it's basically a couple, I think, on his knees, ankle, and foot. He's had 8 surgeries during his career. Latest one, December 22nd. When that was over, he had no feeling in his foot. He had nerve damage in his left foot. They tried treating that a number of different ways. He hadn't responded to any treatment. He still has no feeling in large part of that foot. He's been going to rehab. He's been seeing a neurologist. He told me at the time that he was seriously considering retirement. This was before the preseason, about the time the Galaxy preseason started. He told me he was seriously considering retirement. He didn't think it was going to get better. He did say he'd had this problem before in other operations, but generally the feeling came back in 2 to 3 weeks, and this was a month and a half, and still no feeling. Just my sense then was that, and it wasn't anything he said, it wasn't any mannerisms, just my sense in listening to the words that he was not fully committed to trying to come back, that he was depressed, he was upset with the way that the rehab was going. Robbie has a lot of other things going on in his life now. He just adopted a baby. He's got his clothing line. He has a lot of things going on. And I noticed on his, or actually you were the one that pointed out on his Twitter feed, he's taken down any reference to the LA Galaxy on his bio.
Yeah,
which
just happened.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah,
that's kind of weird. The agent told me Sunday, I said, he's taken down the LA Galaxy mention on his Twitter feed. What should I read into that? And he said, don't read anything into that. And I told him I had a story prepared that I wanted to write saying that Robbie Rogers had decided to retire. And he said I wouldn't do that yet. He hasn't decided to retire. So we'll continue to investigate this. But my sense is at this point in time, if I was going to bet, I would bet retirement over comeback. And even if I didn't bet that way, I don't think we're going to see him, even until mid to late summer, even a best case scenario at this point, given the nerve damage, given the fitness issues, because he hasn't really been able to do soccer fitness stuff. In best case scenario, mid to late summer, my gut sense is we're not going to see him again this year.
Yeah, and I'll add my 2 cents in this. I have talked to some sources that have said that they do not expect Robbie Rogers to return. Some have said, yes, retirement, that seems the most likely scenario. That's, to me right now, I'm sort of with Kevin in this, and gut feeling is that everything sort of seems to be pointing to retirement, fully acknowledging that I think Robbie has said that he's not retiring and that his agent has said that he's not retiring, and understanding that it's just one of these things, and the position we're in right now that sort of feels like that's not a realistic outcome for this particular situation.
Well, and let me turn around after saying that. I think that he's gone, that he's done. Let me just turn around and try to look at it a little bit from Robbie's perspective. He went through a lot in his career. I think we can all agree on that. A guy who was a great young player, was touted as, a U.S. national team player, went to England, struggled with his sexuality, came out, retired and came out as gay, came back and became a star with the Galaxy. Had a really tough first year as a midfielder. I mean, he's gone through a lot. My point is, even if he is prepared to make that decision to retire, once you say you're retired, unless you're Brent Favre or Landon Donovan, once you say you're retired, that's it. You're retired.
Right.
And so, he may be 99.9% there, but he wants to make sure, and that's great. I think he should take the time. There doesn't seem to be any pressure on him right now. As far as I know, he's still getting his paychecks, and let him decide. Maybe it's a thing where he needs to talk to his parents and his family, and he hasn't done that yet. So, I think he deserves the time to make the decision that's best for him. But again, the sense I kind of get is he's kind of trying to come to grips with the fact that it may be over, and he may not be ready to say that yet. But and the other thing is he's 29, a little bit old for a soccer player.
Getting there anyway.
Getting there. I mean, we've seen Clint Dempsey and we've seen Jermaine Jones and others, and yes, a lot of players do have tremendous careers into their mid to late 30s. But with all that Robbie's been through with the 8 surgeries and everything else, I think 29 probably feels a lot older to him right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see him back. This certainly isn't any of us wishing that Robbie Rogers doesn't come back. He's a great guy, always very honest with his takes, and whenever we talk to him afterwards. So I'd love to see him back on the field. It just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. That's sort of where we're leaning right now.
And he has accomplished a lot. He would probably be one of the first to say don't make a political thing out of my career, but the first openly gay male athlete to participate in a major U.S. Professional sport opened the doors for a lot of people, on younger levels to do that, and showed a lot of bravery and courage to do that. And he, having done all that, again, I'm just going to say, he deserves to take whatever time he needs to come to the decision that's best for him and his family.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. If we're going to talk real quickly about retirements and sort of players that we don't know the outcome to, I am hearing that the LA Galaxy should be putting out some sort of announcement this week or early into next week or sometime soon on Dan Kennedy and his exact reason for leaving the team. Listen, Dan Kennedy's not on the team, all right? He's been in the radio
Hasn't
booth.
been on the team all year.
Yeah, hasn't been on the team all year. I've been told he's not on the team, even though he's still listed on the official rosters, still listed on the LA Galaxy's page. So there's all these, things that sort of haven't lined up yet, and we've been waiting for, the answer to Dan Kennedy. I think we're going to get it. I think it's going to be retirement. So no surprise, no shock. Not all of you are sort of like, who cares? But I just wanted to put that out there that I think that announcement should finally be coming here very shortly.
Yeah, I noticed that. I think it was after the last preseason game that he had no stall in the locker room, and that was like a guy who's a veteran like Dan Kennedy, who's been around and done what he's done, doesn't even have a locker in the locker room. So that's when I kind of felt like something was up, and I asked the Galaxy, and they said yes, in fact, that he was no longer with the team, but they were trying to work out the language with the league. Remember, the league pays these guys salary, so their status on the team, whether you're retired, whether you're injured, whether you're rehabbing, whether you're a radio broadcaster in Kennedy's case, the league needs to figure out how that's going to fit under the salary cap. And apparently it's taken a lot longer for the Galaxy and the league to come to an agreement about exactly what's going to happen with Dan Kennedy's contract and who's going to pay it and how much it counts against the salary cap.
Yeah,
because it's a big contract.
Yeah, it is a big contract, and the LA Galaxy need as much relief from that as possible. So hopefully, that they basically could end up getting 100% relief from his contract, and that opens up a whole bunch of room for the LA Galaxy in terms of salary cap. So that would be, a good thing on this. And Dan Kennedy, Kevin, you look back on the LA Galaxy acquiring him. He comes in as the number one keeper. Everybody knew he was the number one keeper. He comes into the preseason. He comes out in the first game, lasts like 23 minutes or something like that, 25 minutes. It wasn't very long. Ends up getting injured. Brian Rowe comes in and realistically never relinquishes the starting spot. I think there was one game where Dan Kennedy played, I think maybe in Philadelphia. And
then Diop, I think, started a couple of games
and then Diop started. So it was just a strange turn of events. Another Bruce Arena Galaxy goalkeeper that doesn't quite pan out, and this is sort of the wrapping up and the end of that. So hopefully we'll get an official announcement on that with Dan Kennedy, and we can go forward that. Let's go back and again the guys who played really well. We talked about Nathan Smith. I mentioned Emmanuel Boateng, Jermaine Jones, and Roman Alessandrini. For me, Emmanuel Boateng was the man of the match in this particular game. Ever since Sebastian Lletget has been gone with that injury that's going to keep him out 4 to 6 months, Emmanuel Boateng has come into the starting lineup, Kevin, and torn things up. And I wonder what is going through his mind at this point, Emmanuel Boateng, knowing that he would, if Sebastian Lletget comes back right now, that Boateng most likely moves to the bench again. And is that bench player. But realistically, if you look at how much he has created for the LA Galaxy and his partnership with Roman Alessandrini coming into play, where would the Galaxy be without Emmanuel Boateng on the field?
Well, one thing with Boateng is he has a really nice chemistry with Alessandrini right now. Those two have hooked up a number of times, setting up goals, scoring goals. They've just played really well together. And that's something that I know that Sebastian Lletget was trying to get with Alessandrini and just never really pulled off. It probably would have happened. I'm guessing it was going to happen because they're both super talented players. But Boateng already has that. And one of the things Curt Onalfo said, he talked about Curt Onalfo talked about how everyone focuses on Boateng's speed, his world-class speed. And Curt said, he gets better every day with the information that we give him. He's a very intelligent player, and he's able to apply things and continually get better, and learn better and learn how to adapt to situations, when you put him out there. And so I still like Boateng as one of those guys that come off the bench. Obviously, he's going to start now, but even when Lletget were to come back, he has that speed is game-changing. But one of the things Curt Onalfo talked about is the more he's out there and the more he experiences those situations, he learns from them, and he doesn't make the same mistake twice. So Boateng is thriving as a 90-minute player right now, and I think the Galaxy are going to be better for it, no matter what happens down the road. When Sebastian Lletget comes back, what's the rest of the team look like at that point? If Boateng and Alessandrini continue to build chemistry like this, what do you do with Sebastian Lletget? A U.S. national team player. Is he the guy that comes off the bench?
Yeah.
Do you go with 5 midfielders? I mean, what do you do?
I know. No, I mean, it starts to get a little crazy right now. I mean, things are relatively easy for Curt Onalfo because it's relatively easy to pick the starting lineup there. The guys who are starting right now, should be starting. There's not, but you bring Sebastian Lletget back, and all of a sudden things get crazy. You bring Ibrahimovic in, and who's going to the bench when that happens too? I mean, if this is what's going to happen, the summer could drastically impact the way the LA Galaxy play and who's on the field, as rightly it should. Real quick on Boateng and Alessandrini.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can't throw Ibrahimovic out there and then just go on.
You can't.
Why did you do that?
Well, that is if he comes in, right? If he comes in, imagine how much that drastically changes. Who's going to go to the bench? Zardes isn't going to the bench, right? Because he would expect him to come in for Zardes.
I've gone up and down on the Ibra thing, and I'm not sure I'm drinking the Kool-Aid right now. Yes, the Galaxy has the money. Yes, this would be the place that he wants to come. Still think he's leaning toward Manchester United, so maybe we should start talking about whether Messi or Neymar or Ronaldo are going to come. But every time we talk about a big name player coming to the Galaxy, it just destroys my whole week because I have to run around and try to track down all these rumors. So I want to put that one to bed for a little while, just for a couple of weeks. Let's let Boateng enjoy his role in the starting lineup and not worry about whether the third best player in the world is looking over his shoulder.
I understand that. I get that. It's sort of almost regardless because people are asking, where should the LA Galaxy, if they're even looking for the summer right now, where should they add players, right? And anytime you add somebody anywhere, you look at how much that's going to affect this starting lineup that's there right now, that realistically is my absolute 100% starting lineup that seems like it can compete with teams in this league. If you bring in another player, one of these guys who more than likely is probably performing very well right now is going to hit the bench. And that's that to me, that's an interesting thought experiment because you look at somebody who realistically might hit the bench. If you were saying that everybody on this team is equal, and if they're not playing well, you bench them, Giovanni Dos Santos might hit the bench, right? And so so if you brought in somebody who was a playmaker, so Gyasi Zardes would still be on that starting lineup because Gio would hit them. But in reality, in realistic times here, Kevin, Giovanni Dos Santos isn't going to hit the bench.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, again, we had one really good game, and we're talking as if these guys are the 27 Yankees.
Yes.
Yeah, they played a great game, and they showed they can. The most important thing to me is they showed they can play that game. Will they play that kind of a game every week? No, but they showed what they can do. And yes, you're right. When you look at those 11 starters, there's very little debate there, except for, as you mentioned, Giovanni Dos Santos. And a couple of things about Gio. One is, he is the highest paid player on the team. Despite all the things the Galaxy say about payroll and everything else, I think the highest paid player on the team has to play himself out of the lineup, as Robbie Keane and Steven Gerrard did last year.
Right.
I think he gets every opportunity. Kurt Onalfo said he wants to see Gio get a little bit more involved in the attack. He wants to see a little bit more from him. I thought Gio was okay. I thought he was terrible in Vancouver. I thought he was okay in this last game, and I thought he had some nice there was some nice chemistry with him and especially Zardes. So I think maybe Gio is at the corner. He hasn't turned the corner yet, but I think maybe with Zardes back now, I think you're going to see a little bit of a different Gio. But I do think he gets a little bit more of a leash than some other players. And the other thing is, let's remember what Dan Beckerman said. Your designated players have to be impact players. Right now, Gyasi Zardes is not an impact player. So, yeah, it's not beyond, where you talked about putting Gio on the bench. That's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Right.
I don't think we're there yet. And the other thing is really, if you were to set Gio right now, do you really put Jack McBean in there? Who do you play?
No, you and one, even if you did do that, even if you did sit Gio on the bench, you'd kill any confidence you had. Again, I think we've talked about it before. He's a bit of a fragile personality in the fact that he gets motivated by success. So having success motivates him to have more success, and he continues. If he gets in some of these negative spirals where he's not having success, it's like it's opposite motivation. He's getting demotivated to actually work harder and try, which is sort of the opposite. So he needs a little bit. I think Wilmer Cabrera said about Cubo Torres before this. He goes, "All I need in the first couple of games is for a ball to ricochet off of him and go into the back of the net." Realistically, if you're a Galaxy fan, all you need right now is for a ball to ricochet off of Giovanni Dos Santos and go into the back of the net and give him some of that confidence to get him going. And Kurt was adamant whenever he was talking about things that he wanted to do a little bit better is getting the ball to Gio a lot earlier because he thought Gio was making some good runs and that the guys weren't picking him out. So Giovanni Dos Santos, I agree with you, Kevin, played better in this game, just like I think Joao Pedro played better in this game, which is what you wanted to see from the trend lines, trend in the better direction.
By the way, Cubo Torres has 6 goals in 5 games this season, so been bouncing off him pretty well.
That's right.
The other thing with Gio too is you talk about he has sort of a brittle personality. Yeah, he does, and the other thing is he's played with a couple of really aggressive players in Robbie Keane and now Alessandrini, and I mean that in the positive sense. So, sometimes if there's a bit of hesitation for Gio, or there's an open spot and Alessandrini sees it first, or Robbie Keane last year sees it first, those guys are in that spot before Gio can react. And I'm not saying Gio's reacting slowly. I'm just saying that these guys are playing maybe the game at a little bit higher speed and a little bit more aggressive, and they are taking away some of the they're taking some of the air out of Gio's sails a little bit, I think. And that's all to the good. Gio needs to decide how he fits in with those guys around him, because clearly Alessandrini is the Galaxy's best player right now, and you're not going to say, hey, back off a little bit to see what Gio can do. No, Alessandrini needs to go 110%, just as he's played so far.
Well, as we talk about Alessandrini, I saw something interesting. MLS put out an article, and realistically, all I did was read the tweet that came with it, but it got me thinking. It says, Romain Alessandrini living up to the hype, right? And I sat there and I even tweeted it out. I said, was there hype surrounding Romain Alessandrini? I mean, from what I remember, Kevin, he was a bit of an enigma. People didn't really know what they were getting whenever we were talking about Romain Alessandrini. You and I both had to go do some digging and find some tape of him and watch the YouTube highlights, which are, if Kevin, you had a YouTube highlight, you'd look amazing playing for the LA Galaxy too. So, if you look at that, that's what we heard. And then we also heard that, fans in Marseille didn't like him, and that everybody thought he was washed up, and ever since he had the knee injury, that was it. So I ask, is he living up to the hype? As in, is he living up to the expectation that we have? I think he's far exceeded any expectation that realistically was put in place, but there wasn't hype, or, there wasn't this, at least in my mind, this general, buzz around the LA Galaxy because they got Romain Alessandrini. It was more like, who the hell is Romain Alessandrini?
Well, I don't know if you remember, the Galaxy got caught on in-between hop and a number of different things with Alessandrini, but the point is they did not do a release that I remember saying that they had signed him. It kind of broke on Twitter, and people were talking about it, and then they confirmed it, and there were articles written, but I don't remember the Galaxy ever doing and I'm sure someone's going to prove me wrong.
I'm going to do it right now. Hold on, give me a couple minutes, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll prove me wrong. And as they did with other players when they brought Ashley Kohler, when they brought Jelle Van Damme, when they brought Nigel de Jong, obviously Steven Gerrard, they had a press conference, they had a media event. They never had that with Alessandrini either. So, and there was a lot of different reasons for that. He had problems with his visa, and there's a number of things he had to do. And by the time he was here full time, he had already been a part of the team for 5 or 6 weeks. So I get it. My point is, if you're hyping this guy, this was kind of stealth hype. I don't know that they were hyping him, and I don't know, was that intentional? Say, hey, let's see how good this guy is before we start talking about how good he is, or did the Galaxy maybe not believe it, or what was the deal? But yeah, you're definitely right. We were talking about everybody but him. We were talking about Jonathan Dos Santos. We were talking about, at one point there was the Chicharito rumor that kind of was going around, and then all of a sudden all these things are being talked about, and Romain Alessandrini lands in our lap, and everyone's Romain who? But, he's been the Galaxy's best player so far, and he seems to be only growing into his role. You can just see him getting more and more confident with each game.
Yeah, I actually do not see an LA Galaxy press release saying that they've signed Romain Alessandrini, which I think there has to be somewhere because he's a designated player and they need to announce whenever they have it. But I don't see it, at least in my inbox. So maybe for right now, Kevin, you're right. All right, until I can search harder and find it. But you are right about Romain Alessandrini. The other thing that I want to say is that this is in no ways like a knock on Alessandrini, saying, where was the hype and all that. Same thing with Van Damme, quite honestly. It was like, oh, okay, well, that sounds cool, like a cool signing. I don't know much about him. I didn't get immediately excited. The name recognition didn't immediately click. And that's okay. And look what you got out of Jelle Van Damme. Look what you're getting out of Romain Alessandrini in, again, small sample size. But there were lots of people who were ready to already ship Alessandrini back to Marseille after the first 2 or 3 games. And you've seen a guy who has scored, 3 goals in the last 2 games, I think, and he's been one of their most dangerous players, and that's what you expect from a designated player. That is the DP sort of thing that you want. You want him to be dangerous. He's been a difference maker on the field. Good job, LA Galaxy. You found your guy. He stays healthy and he continues on this pace, and you have something.
But he's one of those guys where it seems to me, and remember, he had either the goal or the assist on 5 of the Galaxy's first 6 goals. So he was involved in a lot of their scoring. But it seems to me that he has one area of the field that he likes to play right in the middle of the box, coming into the box, right in the center of the net with his left foot. It seems like he's had a lot of success with that. And he's real good on set pieces too. Other teams are going to pick up on that. And one thing I've learned about sports is, a lot of players have success, young players, and you can name a million of them in any sport. Young players have tremendous success. The league, the opponents adjust to what they're doing that gives them success, and then it's up to the young player to readjust, to become successful again. If they take the center of the box away from him, they take the left foot away from him, what does he do to answer that? I think Alessandrini is going to have to show what other kind of stuff he has in his tool belt, because, people around the league are going to catch on to what he's doing and why he's having success, and then he's going to have to adjust to that.
Yeah, it is. Again, it's all about, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and whenever that's in relation to into sports, it's the guys who stick out. It's the guys who are continually doing their best, and teams game plan for them, and they're still able to sort of find those goals and find that way. So that's going to be the next big adjustment for Romain Alessandrini and the LA Galaxy. Of course, traveling to Orlando, which is a whole nother can of worms, as we've already talked to the travel and everything else. That is a very difficult game. Already early in the week, I can tell you, a draw is a good result in Orlando, and everybody should be ecstatic if that's what happens. And if the Galaxy win, that's great. But a draw would be a good thing there, and this is the reality of this LA Galaxy team right now. Any LA Galaxy team that travels, I'm talking about the 2014, 2015 LA Galaxy going to Orlando is going to be a tough game. So kind of regardless of what LA Galaxy team you are, going to Orlando is tough. I wanted to
and then remember, they come home and they play the defending champion Seattle Sounders, who are actually just behind them in the standings. So it's a little bit of a difficult stretch here for the Galaxy.
Yeah, it will be definitely interesting, and going to get some fun names at StubHub Center, so it should be fun. I wanted to do a little bit fun thing here. I know that you cover the LA Kings, and we've talked about this on the show, and there's lots of Kings fans who are also LA Galaxy fans, but the interesting tie-in here is that the LA Kings fired their GM and head coach. They announced that Luc Robitaille, former player, promoted to president of the Kings. They announced that former player Rob Blake promoted to vice president and general manager. And this is an AEG-owned team, Kevin. And you and I were discussing sort of AEG and how they like to promote people and how they like to fill vacancies. And I thought, being you're sort of the expert on both the LA Kings and the LA Galaxy, if you could draw some parallels between what the Kings are doing and relate that to what obviously the LA Galaxy have done.
Well, it all comes back to one guy who runs both teams. Dan Beckerman is the guy in charge of them, and before him, Tim Leiweke was in that position. Tim Leiweke was a guy who liked to be in the media and liked to answer all the questions, and frankly liked to take credit for things that went right and tried to explain things that went wrong. Dan Beckerman is a little bit more of a traditional sort of a front office type guy, if you want to call him that, more traditional CEO. He likes to sit back, put people in position that he trusts, give them some guidance, and then let them go off and run the team. And yeah, he is involved in every decision, certainly, but he likes to give he likes to have a guy speak for each team. And for the Galaxy, Chris Klein, he's the president, former player, really smart guy. He is the guy who is going to be the face of the team in the media. He's the guy that's going to be trotted out to explain things, to talk about signings. And then Pete Vagenas, would be the general manager there. He's also a former player, a guy who was in the organization, was not hired from outside, was promoted from within. So was Chris Klein, promoted from within. Now you see the same thing with the Kings. A couple of ex-players, guys that are in the organization, guys that Dan Beckerman trusts. So Dan Beckerman hires them from within. They're going to be the face of the franchise. They're going to be the ones that are going to I doubt that they're going to be the ones that solely hire the next coach.
Right.
Dan Beckerman will sign off on that, but they'll be the guys that'll be out in front explaining the philosophy of the team, and that's kind of the way Dan Beckerman likes to run that. So it is interesting. In both places, we have former players hired from within the organization, promoted from other positions into those very high pressure jobs, and you can kind of see the Kings and Galaxy going to the same place now. Does that mean all of a sudden the Kings are going to get young and promote people from LA Kings too? Well, there is no LA Kings too, but promote people from the minors. They didn't show that near the end of the season, and maybe that's one of the things that cost Daryl Sutter his job. In the last game of the season, two of the young guns, the guys that they're looking to for the future, were actually healthy scratches and didn't play in that game. And so, maybe that was part of the issue there. The Kings also, unlike the Galaxy, they have a ton of huge contracts that have really weighed them down, players that aren't going to be contributors probably next year, certainly not to the extent of their contract. So different problems, but sort of a similar philosophy in the way the front office, at least, has been organized.
Yeah, and there's the Ontario Reign, right? The Ontario Reign. Yeah, that's LA Kings too. There you go. Okay, yeah. So we got it. All right. All right. That did it for all of sort of the topics I wanted to cover, and that was a fun last one. But we do have listener questions. We already sort of got to Javi's. He's asking, again, if Roger retires, what does that mean for potential summer signings? And I think I'll quickly answer this, Kevin. You can tell me if you're wrong. The Galaxy have said that they're going to go after a position of need. If Nathan Smith fills that right back role and the LA Galaxy feel reasonably satisfied with their defensive depth, I don't expect summer signings to realistically impact the defense all that much. Defensive midfield, maybe in striker as well. But right now, from what I'm seeing, defense not necessarily the big problem that everybody thinks it could possibly be.
No, I did a story last year where I talked to a lot of general managers about how teams are put together. And if you look at the salaries, all of the money in MLS, and I mean all of the money, when you look at the number of DPs and guys making over $1 million, it's all attacking midfielders and strikers. Very few teams have high-priced defenders. The Galaxy were the first one to have a DP as a defender with Omar Gonzalez, and then Ridgewell in Portland. Very few teams even have defending midfielders who are DPs. So if the Galaxy go out and get a big name player or spend money on a player, let me put it that way, it might not even be a big name player, but if they go out and spend money on a player and sign a DP like Alessandrini is a DP, it's going to be an attacking player. What GMs have told me is American players are pretty good at playing defense right now. They're pretty good defenders, and you see that Daniel Steres and Romney, and Nathan Smith, the Galaxy, are a good example of that. So you fill out your roster with American players who play on the back line and make a little bit less money, and then you fill your offensive slots with the big money DP. So if the Galaxy go out and make a splash this summer, and they're talking about signing a DP, that's why Van Dam kind of has the weird contract right now. I expect it to be an attacking player, probably with the way Gio's playing right now, unless he turns around, probably a forward striker person, not even a midfielder. They're pretty loaded in midfield when you figure Sebastian Lletget comes back and right now doesn't even have a starting spot. So I would expect that they'd spend it on an offensive player, and I would expect it would be, a forward or at least a number 10.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Just a sort of side note, if you look at the salaries last year, the 2016 salaries of Robbie Rogers and Dan Kennedy, $228K for Robbie Rogers, $195K for Dan Kennedy. Those may have increased in this year, or, in Dan Kennedy's case, they actually could have decreased, depending on what the contract said and everything. But if you get full relief from that, and the LA Galaxy aren't already using it, that's $423,000 of the salary cap that the LA Galaxy will get back if both of those retire. If both of those would end up being retirements, and if MLS gives full relief, cap relief for that. So summer signings, you might not even have to go out with a DP. You may be able to add a player, Kevin, with a rather healthy $420,000 salary that maybe you could get some defensive midfield help, or maybe you could get some defensive help.
And when you sign that player, you have to think this is a guy who's going to sign. Alessandrini's contract is for 3 years. So if you're spending money on a player, it's going to be a guy that's going to be around for a couple of years. So again, if you do look at the midfield, you could say, well, Jermaine Jones is signed for 1 year. He's 35. How much longer is he going to be around? Maybe Sebastian Lletget, who's played really well in the central midfield, goes there next year, and then you have still a very young, very talented midfield with Boateng, Alessandrini, João Pedro, and Sebastian Lletget. So maybe you feel like we're really set there. And again, if you're going to sign somebody to a DP contract and it's going to be a couple of years, again, a withdrawn forward or a striker is probably where the money would be best spent.
Yeah, it very well could. All right, let's get to some other questions. And Cameron asks, and who starts in the midfield next to Jones on Saturday? Husidic stays back so Jones can get forward? Still think Pedro needs more time. Is Baggio Husidic in play to take over for Joao Pedro? We saw that sub happen, Kevin, against Montreal. Joao Pedro came out, Baggio Husidic came in. Do they flip that role perhaps? Does Baggio start the game? Does Pedro come in? Is everybody realistically worried about Joao Pedro when the LA Galaxy are going to continue to start him because they paid a ton of money for him?
I don't think the money enters in as much as the education part of it, him learning how to play in MLS and learning the chemistry with his teammates. And he clearly got better from the Vancouver game to this one. I still kind of am. I'm of the opinion that sitting at least for part of a game and watching really would be beneficial to him and maybe take some of the pressure off. It does look at times that he's put a lot of pressure on himself. He knows he's making a lot of money, more than he made in Portugal. He knows the team's counting on him. So maybe there is a little bit of pressure involved, but it seemed to me that now, and I'm going to get this totally wrong, as I usually do, but just looking at what happened in the last game, I thought Curt Onalfo said, we're going to play Joao Pedro and we're going to play Diop, and we're going to let them make their mistakes and we're going to show them confidence. If I'm reading that correctly, I think Joao Pedro, if he doesn't start, he plays a lot of minutes at Orlando City. You can make the argument that it's his first cross-country trip, that Husidic needs to get in there. There is something about keeping your guys on the bench fresh.
Right.
We're only 6 games into the season, but, he hasn't played a lot, and you might need him for the 14th or 15th game of the season. If he hasn't played up till now, I know he's played a couple of games with Galaxy too, but he needs to get some MLS minutes. So maybe with the long road trip, maybe you do take Joao Pedro off for a game, but it seemed to me that the message from the starting lineup in the last game, the Montreal game, was we're going to stick with these guys. We're going to let them make mistakes, and we're going to live with that because they're going to become better for it down the road.
All right, let's rapid fire now. We got about 4 minutes left, and then we're done with this show. Let's say quick yes or no, and we'll see if we can make this a yes or no. Is this year's team an outside-in team, i.e. wingers producing most of the attack as we have seen, or should we see more in the middle flowing through Gio? What do you think, Kevin? Is this an inside-out team?
Yes, very, very much. And I think Gio could get involved, but I think if it's going to go forward at all from the wings, it's going to go to Gyasi Zardes at this point.
Yeah. Gyasi Zardes, Alessandrini, Emma Boateng. It's funny, Emma Boateng seems like the wide winger Bruce Arena always wanted, and right now he is that guy. So that's just another little interesting thing there. Let's go. Let's see what else other things I was saying. I like this question. It was in. Say hypothetically, here we go, hypothetical. Robbie Rogers is back to full fitness for the game in Orlando. Who starts, Robbie Rogers or Nathan Smith? Kevin.
There's no, well.
I know, but it's hypothetical. It's hypothetical.
No, you start Robbie Rogers, but he's not going to be, it's ridiculous. Excuse me, it's not a ridiculous question, but it's a question that can't be answered because Robbie Rogers will not be in full fitness. So if he was, I would start him. But Nathan Smith is going to be the starter there.
Nathan Smith will be the starter. I think that it's still, for me, let me be the idiot, okay? I'll be the idiot. Nathan Smith starts over Robbie Rogers. You get more going forward with Smith than you will with Robbie Rogers. That's a ridiculous take. I hope everybody enjoys it. At Center of the Galaxy on Twitter, thank you for that ridiculous question. So that way I could give a ridiculous answer and get hounded for it. All right.
By the way, talking about Boateng, he still hasn't scored a goal against anybody but Real Salt Lake.
Every game should be against Real Salt Lake. He is the owner of Real Salt Lake, according to Wikipedia. So just keep your eyes on that. Let's see. Do you think, Brian writes in, do you think Gio performs better with Zardes on the field?
Yes.
Okay. That was easy. That one, I like that one too. Yes, he does. Absolutely. And I think that chemistry will continue to grow. Let's see. LA Galaxy Outsider, your favorite person, Kevin, sent me a tweet that has clapping hands in it. And so I imagine that as I read this particular tweet, I have to clap when I do it. Otherwise, it would not be in the spirit of this particular tweet. So I will attempt to do that now. So here we go. Why is we not trying Rafa at CDM? Okay, I think I got it. Why is Rafa Garcia not playing central defensive midfielder? And then Outsider says, my dude is a workhorse and needs to play. All right, so that's his take on Rafa Garcia. Do you think Rafa could slide in for that defensive midfielder role instead of Joao Pedro? Do you think Baggio Husidic, we're giving too much to Baggio right now? Maybe Rafa is the better answer there, being he's not playing right back anymore.
Well, I think Baggio is the first guy, and I first guy off the bench. That's an interesting question, though, because if we are building for the future, I think that Rafa's the future and Baggio Hasidic not so much. João Pedro is the guy now, so there's going to be very little playing time there anyways. But until we find out, until there's some clarity on Robbie Rogers, I think the thinking is Rafa is the backup to Nathan Smith. Let's say Nathan turns an ankle, gets tired in the heat.
How dare you,
Orlando?
How dare you, Kevin? This poor team has had injuries like crazy, and you just want to throw that out into the universe.
Well, my point is that you don't want a guy, especially a young guy, bouncing between positions, and he's still learning to play on the back line. He's still learning to play at right back, and I think the last thing you need to do is try to give him some reps at central midfield. He knows how to play that. I know he can play that, and maybe he plays it even better. But I think right now you keep him where he is. You let him get comfortable there because you don't know, when or if you're going to need him, and you do have some cover at defensive midfielder right now, so I would keep him there. But going forward, I mean, as we sort all this out, I think definitely he's the guy to play that role behind João Pedro going forward.
Yeah, it seems like it is. All right, that's going to be it. I know we ran out of some time for some of the listener questions. We certainly do appreciate all of them. We always thank you guys for writing in on Twitter for us. At Galaxy Podcast is where you can find it. I usually prompt you on Mondays, but you can always throw them in and say, hey, Mondays, it's Monday. Here's a question I have for the show, and we appreciate that. Kevin, anything else you want to talk about, touch on before we wrap up this particular episode?
Part of the theme, at least in the stuff that I did last week, was the fact that Galaxy were 10th in a 11-team conference, and they were looking up at Minnesota United, who had given up 20 goals, and Galaxy were behind them in the standings. That one win, they're now in the top 6.
Yeah, they're above the red line.
And if they win again, they could be as high as third. So, I know it's early in the season, but it just goes to show you, one game can turn a lot around, and not just in the confidence of the team, which went through the roof, frankly. I mean, going down to that locker room afterwards, it was a totally different team. They felt so good about themselves. So one game can move you in the standings and can move your mental situation as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they handle Orlando now. Saturday, April 15th, 2017, a 12 p.m. Pacific time kickoff against Orlando City down in Orlando. Broadcast on Fox and Fox Deportes. That's where you can find that game. And, of course, we will have a live show for real this time, unlike last time when the power went out and there was no live show. But we will have a live show for you on Thursday night here at Corner of the Galaxy /live. That show will kick off at 7 p.m. So join me and hopefully Wendy for that show. Kevin, we good? Everything good?
Everything's good.
All right. If you're looking for Kevin Baxter on Twitter, it's at KBaxter11. At me on Twitter, at JGuessman, JGUESMAN, and at Galaxy Podcast. And please go to the LA Times and read all of Kevin's wonderful articles. Comment on there and let the paper know that that you actually appreciate his LA Galaxy coverage and him coming on this show as well. So we certainly appreciate Kevin stopping by after a busy week, and he has a couple different articles to write about the Kings and World Cup and all sorts of fun things to get to. So we'll let him do that. All right, that about does it for me as well. If you're, again, looking for the podcast, go to cornerofthegalaxy.com. Go to iTunes, go to Stitcher, all those places, type in Corner of the Galaxy, and that's where you can find us. For Mr. Kevin Baxter of the LA Times, I'm Josh Guessman, and you've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy from the Box podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast, and be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. And for all of your independent LA Galaxy news, discussion, and entertainment, including this podcast, head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com. Fans, thanks for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.